One of the nice things about lists in Python is they're what's called dynamic, which means on the fly, you can add to them, you can put more data inside of them, or you could take away data if you don't need it. So you can change them on the fly, and that's one of the nice features of them. So let's talk about how you can add data to a list. Now there's lots of different ways you can do it. We're going to focus on just the two primary ways to do that. So let's say I have this list called my list and it has a bunch of names, Alice, Bob, Candace, Dave. Let's say I want to add some data to the list. Now, one way to do it is to use a function that's called append, A-P-P-E-N-D, append. And append will put data on the end of the list, so it's like standing in line for something. So the way you call this function is you use what's called the dot notation. So what you do is you start with the name of your list, in this case my list, you put a dot or a period, and then you put the name of the function that you want to call, in this case append. And I'm going to use a parentheses because it is a function, so I have to give it some parameters, some data. And the data I have to give it is, what do I want to add to the list? So let's say I want to add the string Emma, the name Emma. So I put append Emma, and let's make sure it's there. So let me print it out. Okay, and there she is. So Emma's at the end. So the append function will put data on the end of a list. Now, we haven't seen this notation before, this so-called dot notation. We've primarily seen where you have the name of the function and then inside you have the parameters. But sometimes you're going to see this dot notation as well for calling functions in Python. And this is typically if it operates on something like a list. Okay, that's a complex data structure. Okay, so my list.append, and then the data inside, we'll add it to the end. Okay, now what if I wanted to put some data in the middle of the list somewhere? Like say I wanted to put a name where Candace is. I want to insert a name where Candace is and then have everything shift up to make space for that. So there's another function that will do that. Append puts it on the end. There's another function called insert, which will put it somewhere in the middle. So to use insert, I need to know two things. I need to know, number one, the index of the position in the list where I want to insert it. So remember, we start with index 0, start counting at 0. So Alice is at 0, Bob is at 1, Candace is at 2. So it would be index 2. And then the other thing is the data that you want to insert. So let's say I want to insert the name Fred. Okay, so once again, I'm going to use the so-called dot notation. I'll put the name of my list. I'll put a dot. And this time I want to call the insert function. So I put insert and then a parentheses because it's a function, so I need to give it some parameters. So the first parameter is the index position in the list where I want to put the new data. So we figured out it's index 2. And then the second thing is the actual data that I want to put in. So I want to put Fred. Okay, so let's make sure it's there. Let's print it out. Okay, so you can see what happened was at position 2, where Candace originally was, so Candace was originally there, that's index 2. Now Fred is there, and notice what happened is everybody moves up. So Candace, Dave, and Emma all moved up, so there's space. They shifted up, so there's space for Fred. Okay, so for lists, two primary ways to insert. There's the append, which will put it on the end, and insert if you want to put it somewhere in the middle. Okay, so really easy to deal with lists.